Hi, my name is Dan Paulson and welcome to my channel, Just One Truth. I'm going to contend that every spiritual teaching and religion, viable religion, nests the same inner secret teaching, and that the outer surfaces are all different. And I found the way to recover those. It's viewable. It's not secret. They're nested. And I believe that this is something that they did in their culture when they were telling stories, which was their biggest media of the day. It was very important for them to have these big, huge stories with fun stuff inside of them. People today treat it like it's somehow they try to make it into history, factual, not understanding that there's a complex interwoven story right here that isn't real. It isn't fake necessarily, but it serves a purpose. And only certain people get access to that. I found access, or at least I believe I did. And the reason I say that, and this will unfold as we move along, that as we use this very viewable process from belief to belief and use the exact same process to read it and to decode the verses, you will see that they continually unfold with the exact same lesson. And all of the lessons entail turning inward and healing yourself. They all teach that. So in order to recover the teachings and to extract instructions, as it were, or directions on how to interact with the teaching in such a manner as to affect a change in one's own personal life. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is very complex. It is not easy to see right in the beginning. Let me get right to what's going on and how this works. It is a verbal puzzle, like I said. A similar example, but not exactly a spiritual example, is a fable. Aesop's fables, 500 years BC. There is one of them that everybody knows about, the tortoise and the hare. And what we have there is the race occurred between the tortoise and the hare. The hare was faster, took off, got ahead, got confident, took a nap because he was tired. And the tortoise won because the hare slept through it. Moral of the story, slow and steady wins the race, according to the author. What if that moral wasn't there? Why wouldn't the moral be something like, when you are in the lead, don't stop? There are other ways to interpret that verse. So what we have is a story right there that is a nonsensical story in a way. It's a fun carrier story that has a lesson that we're supposed to glean. Remembering these things are happening thousands of years ago. This is what people were passing around and having fun with and learning and teaching lessons. And it makes perfect sense. All of us would have done that as well. Okay, let's leave the fables off to the side, and I'm going to suggest that these stories are the same way, except that they're tighter. There's another detail of resolution that's added in, and what I think I need to do is to just jump to those and not spend a lot of time describing why I think that that's the case. I'm going to go right to what the teaching is going to bring us to. I'm going to bring everybody to the end so that as we start going through and looking at these, it'll emerge easier. We don't have to stop along the way and figure out what they're getting to. We already know what they're getting to. We don't have the kind of time today that they had on their hands. We're very busy. I felt like I had to cut to the chase, and I think that maybe we need to do this a little bit more. Okay. First of all, we have a conscious mind, a subconscious mind, and then there is a unified field that we all exist within, that we all share. We would have evolved with that, somehow sharing the capacity to sense each other's emotions. Probably that's it. Just enough to be kind of aware of things and help us with safety. If the group is happy, you know you're supposed to participate. This is good. If it's something fearful, you know you got to scatter and get away. That would have been the earliest thing that we came up with. But that characteristic is something that I fully believe is there. We sense each other's feelings. People worship and they have these incredible feelings. This is something that can be inferred, I believe. It can be observed. Everybody can experience it. Sometimes you share thoughts with people. It's not very interactive. I mean, it's not very accurate. It's not as good as seeing or hearing if we have good vision and hearing. But it's just there. It's like an image of something that comes in and out of our conscious mind through that field. Anyway, that's there. If you don't think that's there, you're not going to get this. I don't, however, believe that field is supernatural. I believe that we interact with it because we have a brain, an electrochemical brain, and a central nervous system, and all the way that the body works, that we sense and we pick up and we can feel each other to some degree. Sometimes incredibly so, sometimes not very well. Some people are better at it than others. At any rate, those are the factors I'm going to be talking about in a very matter-of-fact way. When they were describing things, they didn't have that kind of detail. What they were looking at is a conscious mind and then some kind of a soul, a spirit, something somehow is they're using verbiage to describe what's going on as you are repeating behaviors, acting out, screaming, yelling, getting triggered and getting pissed about something over and over again. That's a demon playing out. They don't know how else to explain it. We know that there is an issue that needs to be resolved that is continually cycling. It's the same thing. It is the exact same thing, but they're describing it thousands of years ago. We have to kind of update what they were getting to. And if we do that, this stuff is going to come online. That's a necessary component. We have to make the subconscious mind what we're working with. But what we know and we take for granted because it's just a part of the way we're raised is that we have that brain in the subconscious, that there's a electrochemical storage there, that we are holding memories and we're holding the emotional state of those memories. All of our knowledge today shows us that, and they observed all of that too. They just didn't have the brain and the other science behind the understanding of how that worked. It looked magic. It looked magical, sure. So as we go through and decode these, if we use the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and then that unified field to describe and to explain things, everything is going to work. For example, in Daoism, if you're familiar with that, it's the flow. It's how you experience life. And we can all look at that ourselves and say, boy, I have a really good life or I have a bad life. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I don't have control over it. Some people have really good lives. Some people's lives totally suck. What makes that happen? And the idea in Daoism is that what we hold up here is what creates that. It is what we have become in life that creates the flow of our life, that we are in some way flowing through this unified field with other people and experiencing what it is that we're carrying inside of us. And that in order to change the experience in life, you change this up here. And that is going to emerge again and again. That's the one thing that happens. That's the one thing that is demonstrable. Experientially. The supernatural, I don't go there. And if you're looking for life after death and promises of things like that, I can't find any of that. I leave all the supernatural behind. I do this very scientifically. I'm looking for what's really there. I'm not looking to find what I want. Yeah, I do have what I want, but I know to set that off to the side and find what's there. Okay, now I'm very much a hands-on learner, and when I try to talk, I fumble and mumble a lot. Let me try to just go through an example right here, and I'm gonna start from the perspective of the master teacher. Let's pretend like we are the master teacher for a minute, and we want to pass along a lesson to people. We have learned in life that this anger, this shame, this hatred, whatever we're hanging on to is causing us continued issues in life. We have learned that somehow we have to forgive. So we pass that along and we tell people, you got to forgive who hurt you. Yeah. And everybody says, no, that doesn't sound very fun. It's not my fault. I'm not going to do that. They're not ready to do that. They're not at a point where they've decided that they need to forgive because their life is a shambles. So your lesson won't go anywhere. So you put it in something different. And in this case, I'm going to do something very simple, and it's not a spiritual verse, but we'll pretend like it is. I might put it into something that says, an anchored ship will not sail. Now what I have done is what I've done at that moment is I've taken the components of myself, my psyche, my soul, to them, whatever the psyche, what I'm hanging on to, and I have created analogs that represent what they are in the physical world. The anchor represents I'm hanging on to something. The ship represents me just going around and around this thing that I'm hanging on to. And the ocean represents my life, and I can't sail free. So I've nested a lesson very cleverly in something that people would go, I like that story about the ship that won't sail when it's anchored. And they'll pass that along. You can turn that into a religious verse by saying, an anchored ship cannot sail, saith the Lord. You've just put it into a different shell. That is all that is happening here. They're adding bits and pieces of analogs to the story to change the way it sounds and to change the outer carrier shell, the thing that has the appeal to the masses, while meantime, inside of it, whoever knows the tools, the keys, the mechanism realizes, oh, I got to forgive that person that molested me. I got to forgive my rapist. I need to forgive who stole from me, or I need to stop thinking about those people this way, or I need to stop thinking about myself being, worthless piece of crap. All of those things that we do that wipe us out, that we become a part of, and then we flow through life going that way. These teachings are telling us, hey, get out of that. Step out of that. Okay, now let's take that same verse and come at it from the other end. We are not the master, and we don't know what's nested in there. We're the person that hears an anchored ship will not sail. And we might think, yeah, kind of obvious, isn't it? Have a nice day. That's it. You get the surface meaning, the literal meaning out of it. That's layer number one. Layer number two is where it actually begins to shift into becoming analogs, and people do realize it's a metaphor and that it's not a literal thing. It's supposed to be a teaching about something. And a person may look at that and interpret it and say, oh yeah, I realize I am the ship and I am hanging on to something. That's kind of an easy transition right there. But it might be something in that person's life typically that's in the physical world. It's outward looking. It isn't looking at the soul yet. It's looking at life. And it can be valuable and make sense. The person can say, yeah, as long as I'm hanging onto this bad relationship, I got to let it go. Or this dead-end job, or not getting an education, or something. Somehow I'm not moving in life because I'm hanging on to something, being lazy, being whatever. And that would be a verse that a person could interpret that and gain viability and be okay with that verse. Another person may look at it and say, ooh, I know what that means, because their own experiences have been maybe abandoned or something. And they might look at it and say, oh, it's very important to anchor yourself in a safe port. Make sure that you're not wandering off someplace in the world, getting just lost and off into tide pools and eddies or something. You want to be with your family and your friends and nested someplace in where you're hanging on to. That same verse suddenly took an opposite meaning. Still sounds good. Neither one of them is what was nested in there. That verse is going to carry, but that's layer two. That would be the layer two, where the theists and the atheists fight over the historicity of the story. There's layer three that is inside, that is about us, that is what is really there. And that is what I am contending all of these teachings do. And let's take a couple of examples here real quick to look at them so I can demonstrate that. And I'm just going to grab a few quick examples. I'm not going to describe where Lao Tzu comes from or the Tao Te Ching or anything. I've got that in other videos. I don't want to replicate too much here and make it into something longer than it needs to be. So these are verses that exist and appear and are easily something that any seeker can easily research. Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Okay, here's how we have to make sense of it. Going back to the first one, naming is the origin of all particular things. We can't take that literally. It makes absolutely no sense. The way you decode these verses is you take the verse, you start at your consciousness, turn inward to your inner self, your inner conscious, and that's where you apply the verse. And you realize that the words that are in there are analogous to some characteristic that you hold. Naming is the origin of all particular things. When you are born, what are we? We can become anything. What do we become? We become our life experiences until we wake up, right? We become a mixed bag. Some people become love and joy and peace. Some people become angry and hurt. Some people carry a lot of pain and hurt and shame with them. Naming is the origin of all particular things. in Lao Tzu's teaching he's going to get to is that as you're having experiences in life, whatever they are, they could be joyful, they could be horrific. That when you have that experience and you mentally decide whether you like it or you don't like it, it's hurtful, it's shameful, it's painful, I'm going to hate it, something like that. You're going to take that memory and that emotional state and put them away together. You are beginning to make who you are. You are naming, and that is what the origin is for you in your life, in your world. As we get into the next verse, this is not the very next verse that he has. I'm going to grab a few random here. I will let you know that the teaching is not tit for tat. It isn't as though there was one primer that's been passed around. All the teachings are in there, but they're jumbled a little bit. They're not exactly in order. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm jumping to another one that says, we join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We do the same thing. We grab this and we understand that there are parts of it that are probably not component parts of the inside of us. We join spokes together in a wheel. Wheel is the component part there. There's a wheel. The spokes we don't care about. It's the center hole that makes the wagon move. So we got a center hole, a wagon in motion, and a wheel. The center hole, when we name something, that is what goes into our hub. That hub is representative of the place where we store that. And that as life unfolds, the wheel continues to circle. If you put away shame, something in life is going to continue to cycle. That's going to cause that to be close. You're going to be lashing out somehow, somewhere. Anger, hatred, all manner of things. I always go on those, but there could be a lot of very difficult things that we have to look at that we don't think we're very good, that we're worthless, that we're ugly, that we're all manner of things, that we are, that is the thought that we're putting into our electrochemical brain, which functions with the rest of our body in the unified field and creates the life that we have. It is the center hole that makes the wagon move. It is the quality of what is in the axle that creates the motion that causes the cyclical return of things. You could have good things in that hub. You can have bad things in that hub. But you can see what we've done here is made in the same way. This verse is about us, and we're using component parts of it to describe our experience in life. Okay, I'm going to move on to another verse 500 years later in history from Jesus. Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. How radically different does this sound? Or does it? Take a look at it. Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. You're looking inward. You're judging. What did Lao Tzu say? Don't name things. That's the origin of things. When you judge something, you're judging the experience. You're judging what it is that you're putting away. If you judge it, if you create an emotional state with it that you don't deal with, it's going to create a continuation. Does it? We move on. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged. Yeah, it's going to keep cycling back. Do you see the teaching here is the same teaching? So it sounds strange, but this is it. If you take this path and you put serious effort into your spiritual path, it should have a very effective psychological outcome. This is a very interactive teaching. And the results of that psychological outcome will be the manner in which your life unfolds, the quality in which your life unfolds from where you are, from where you start. And that's it, those two things right there. We're trying to change the current of our life. Let me move on again to another Jesus one. This one is fun because it's kind of rich with those analogs that I talk about. In the morning, when he returned to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the side of the road, he went to it and found nothing at all on it but leaves. Then he said to it, "May no fruit ever come from you again." And the fig tree withered and died. Well, how crazy is that? If you take this literally, he's the son of God. Sound like he had an angry moment. If he had the capacity to kill the tree and he was hungry, he had the capacity to make it heavily laden with fruit. He chose to kill it off. We're going to take this and bring those elements inside of us. The fig tree is something that grows in our garden. The garden is always going to be something that, like the land or someplace you have to get back, your mind, your subconscious, the place where you have all this stuff stored you don't want to deal with. You want to get all that stuff out. You're looking to get that back. The tree is an analog representing something that is emerging from there. It is something that comes out of you, that emerges, that doesn't produce something that is good for you to consume. And consuming here in the spiritual sense, or let's just take it to the psychological sense, it is learning, it is taking things on, it is thinking, it is being, it is having an active mind. Consuming means wiring, networking, becoming more. Opposite of being at peace and quiet. Opposite of what would be called fasting in the spiritual world, of not taking things in. We can do that in the physical world, but as analogs, they actually translate pretty well. Don't feed my body, don't feed my mind. Exactly like that. Okay, the tree that is not producing something good is analogous to an experience in our past that is not a good experience. It's not doing anything for us. It's a part of our past, and it needs to go away. Christ, in this case, it's going to sound sacrilegious to some people. You got to let that go. Christ is you. It is the consciousness. It is whoever is on this path that is saying, I've got to make this change. I have got to take control of my life, my garden, my trees that are not producing, and kill them off and destroy them. The verse then makes sense as a spiritual teaching or as a healing teaching, as a psychological healing teaching, nested in a pretty obscure way, but you can see that it would emerge from there if you use the same process over and over again. All of these become component parts of who and what we are. And the stories that we gather, the lessons that we gather, the teachings that we gather to understand them, they go inside of us. It's a spiritual teaching. It's an inward teaching. It's meant to be that way. So you find the lessons emerge by bringing the story inside of you. The tricky parts are, number one was making that transition and saying, just call it the subconscious mind. Number two is realizing they're analogs. And number three, those analogs are not fixed. They vary from place to place, from culture to culture, and from time to time. They're very similar. The mind and the subconscious. The conscious and the subconscious will be referred to as husband and wife, or as father and son. There's a number of different ways to classify all the pieces and parts. That field that we all exist within, that can be the ocean, someplace you must sail, someplace you must travel. All of those become parts of the story that help us decode it in a way that leads us inward to our own personal healing. That's what I'm exploring on this channel, how all of those teachings will bring us to the same place. Honestly, there's a part of me that just can't help being mystified that this teaching is there, that it's prevalent, that it has been known. It's been very widespread. It was obviously a part of storytelling culture. It was an incredibly important part to them because it's everywhere. The people that call it New Age, this is what is nested in all of the religions prior to your religion. Whatever your religion is, unless you follow the Epic of Gilgamesh or something, this goes back far. It is the oldest teaching that I see. It is not New Age. It is simply being redefined and modernized with verbiage that we can understand. At least that's the way that I see it. There's no mystery here. When we look outward, we see a billion things, and people can take it so far. People's minds stretch. Oh my gosh, there's businesses out there on how to exist at layer 2. Okay, and quite obviously there was a time where layer 2 was incredibly important in the age of storytelling and people that can't read and write, and there's no libraries or anything like that. Layer 2 that's the vehicle. That's the case. That's what takes it from place to place. People aren't going to carry those boring lessons, but they'll carry fun stories. So the fun stories, they existed for a very good reason. Lao Tzu taught kind of oddball. He didn't teach it religiously, nor did Buddha. They taught it in ways, though, that you're supposed to figure it out. The religions came about and took on kind of a different face. They still contain the same teachings. They simply, and they maintain a lot of the analogs. The verbiage they changed were things like, you will flow in the Tao, to you will live in the kingdom of God. There you go. They kept the same thing, but they changed the face of it. It sounds radically different. But from that time on, you continue to see an evolution from Greek stories that were just these monster epics that were just they're the most wonderful thing to take inside and go on, take an adventure inside of you with that story. But it went all the way to Stoics in Roman times that were teaching this pretty plain language. Let go of what you're hanging on to. Don't be angry. They very plain languaged this exact same teaching. So it's just, it's bizarre to me to see that somehow in all those cultures, there were people that knew what was going on, while most people didn't give a damn. But they were still getting it out there. People that think Jesus learned from Buddha. Now, all these teachings come from people observing and going, here is what happens when you look and you stop invoking supernatural explanations and you just look and observe. This is what you come to. Doesn't matter who you are or when you do it. You'll come to understand it and you'll explain it in the terms of your day and age. And that's what all of them did. Anyway, I'm anxious to explore that more here. I don't know what to do other than to just continue to go through verses and show how they decode. So at current, unless something happens that kind of directs me somewhere else, that's the current game plan, is I'm just going to keep going through verses. I'll grab chunks of different things at different times and keep doing the comparisons and keep trying to do some small ones mixed with big ones, showing how sometimes the stories are huge to contain a small lesson, and sometimes they're contained in just very small, compact verses without a lot of fluff to them. I think that there's a point where I got to where I recognized the analogs better and better, where I just transitioned into almost reading it like it was a different language. And it's simply redefining those words and using them specifically on your psyche. That's it. Once you do that, it's like, wow, okay. It's, do it to everything. They will all reveal the same teaching. And I thought, well, maybe this just happens that if you do this, everything you do. I've grabbed other books and novels and tried things. It doesn't work. I've grabbed the Book of Mormon. Nothing there. None of this nested teaching is in. Like once you get past the Bible and you get into other Christian works, it's all layer 2, trying to justify layer 2. The nested teachings are in the earliest source material. Stay there. Stay closest to the source as you can. Downstream, with a lot of people putting in their interpretations, they didn't know what was in there, and they dropped it along the way, trying to explain their understanding of layer 2 better. So be aware of that. They're doing their best, but they're not on board. Go look for yourself. Ultimately, this nested teaching, regardless of the vehicle that it's in, once you find a way to use it on your own path, you find that the teaching itself is the guidebook. It is the guide for the path to get through. It's basically how to leave your past behind and move along, forgive, love, those sorts of things that we actually kind of know. They just confirm them without supernatural. There's more there than people think. And at the same time, there's a lot less there than many people think. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll come back and watch some more. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next video.